I love going on roller caribbean cruises because it's my absolute favorite way to travel, but I'm the first to admit there are a few things that bug me about going on them. And today I'm sharing the most frustrating things about Royal Caribbean up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and I'm the first to admit Royal Caribbean is not perfect. No one's perfect, in fact, and the same holds true for cruise lines. Royal Caribbean does a phenomenal job at delivering a quality and really fun vacation experience, but there are a few things that can happen on board a ship or during the planning process that frustrates even the most seasoned cruise veteran. I often like to share tips on here on how to avoid mistakes or pitfalls of cruises, but sometimes there are things that are simply unavoidable because it's just the way it is. So this week, I'm sharing some of the major frustrations that I've encountered, as well as some of others from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com viewers. Let's start off with largely the most widespread frustration among any Royal Caribbean cruiser, and that is inconsistency in the product. Now, listen, it's hard for any company to get it right across the board, and the same for every single person. It's something that any company wants to do when you put out a policy or a protocol that it's implemented clearly across the board, right? If you go to McDonald's and you get a Big Mac, the Big Mac should be the same, exactly the same. But this also applies to rules and how things are implemented on cruise ships. And Royal Caribbean has traditionally done a good job with this, but there has definitely been inconsistencies with rules, whether it is the dress code in the main dining room, which is kind of sort of never enforced or sometimes enforced or sporadically enforced, right? Whether it is the dining plan rules and if you can go to Johnny Rockets and get a milkshake included or not with your drink package, or if Johnny Rockets is included with the ultimate dining package. If you talk to any cruiser who's been on at least a couple cruises, you definitely have heard stories about inconsistencies with policies being put out there. Part of it is maybe training. Part of it is just simply sometimes when new procedures come out, they're not clearly indicated. And it's just, I think part of it is just the being in the nature of the beast. You're dealing with 20 some odd ships across the world, different protocols, things happen, right? And it's hard to get it exactly the same on every single ship. Personally, I think some of these are somewhat avoidable. Certainly, examples are the inconsistent rules about dress codes, right? To me, you either have dress codes or you don't have dress codes. Enforcing the chair hog rules, right? About that. If there's rules written that say X, Y, or Z, then they should be implemented X, Y, or Z. But it is what it is, and you should expect sometimes when you go on a cruise that even though the sign or your cruise compass may say something, it is implemented differently, or experiencing something on one ship but different on another ship, just the way it is. Now, something else that definitely frustrates a lot of cruisers before the cruise ever starts is the IT issues. Yes, if you've been on Royal Caribbean's website long enough, no doubt you've run into a error or incorrect information or something along those lines, right? You may all remember one of the most famous examples of this was the $18 drink package. Ah, yes, the good old days. Back in 2019 in the summer, there was on the Royal Caribbean Cruise Planner for a very short time a drink package for $18 a day. The drink package, by the way, usually goes for somewhere like $40 to $60 a day. Obviously, that was a mistake. But this is just an example of many others in which you go to the website, you'll see incorrect information on there. The website may not work. And one of the most common situations is somebody goes to log into their account and oops, it doesn't work in there. A lot of other people know, well, in that situation, you can either change web browsers, you can give it a little bit of time. Eventually, it solves itself. But the IT issues with trying to get everything to work right in terms of logging in, signing up, getting that consistently across the board, it's definitely been a pain point for a lot of cruisers out there. Now, to Royal Caribbean's credit, over the years, I have noticed they've spent a lot of time working on this to try to improve it. But it is definitely still an issue with some of the implementations that they have out there. And as a cruiser, you have to understand that sometimes when you go out there and you see, oh boy, there's a problem out there, it's just an IT issue. Classic example of this I'll share really quick was on the new Adventure of the Seas sailings that Royal Caribbean announced for this summer out of the Bahamas. I booked it on day one, and the next day, the website actually told a lot of people, including myself, our cruise is canceled. Obviously not the case. It was just a mix-up in the logic there on the website, but just something to keep in mind that sometimes Royal Caribbean changes policy, but in a lot of cases, it might just be the website. Now, here's a frustration that came up recently based on what's happening here and obviously in 2020 and 2021, and that is future cruise credits. The future cruise credit program is something that existed before the cruise industry shut down due to the global health crisis, but unfortunately back then, FCCs were kind of something that really didn't exist all that much. It was very infrequently used, right? But fast forward to what's happening these days, a lot of people have FCCs, and it still remains a frustration because it's not as super simple as you might think in order to figure out how much you got, have you used it, what it's applied for, when does it expire, etc. FCCs seem like they should be just like gift cards. Like you go to a gift card that you get from a particular store or vendor, you can log on their website, check your balance, see when it expires, all that kind of stuff. FCCs really don't work that way. Part of it is, again, based on the fact that FCCs were designed back in a different age of cruising in which they were largely unused by guests. People don't really run into FCCs all that much. And in addition, when they were used, you only had maybe one at a time you were having to deal with. But these days, a lot of people have a lot of FCCs out there from canceled cruises, and there is no central place to look up FCCs based on your Crown and Anchor number, your name, or even the FCC voucher itself. You may have to basically call Royal Caribbean. They've got to look it up. And if you have multiple ones, again, there's no central place to look it up. So it definitely can be a bit of a frustration point in there. The good news is it's getting a little bit better. Royal Caribbean is adding new tools all the time. And of course, a good travel agent will help. But in the interim, you still got to kind of keep track of it all yourself. And that definitely is a frustration. Another thing that definitely frustrates me is figuring out the price of cruises today, doing the mock bookings. So whether you're trying to plan out a new cruise or you're trying to figure out if the cruise you have booked has had a price drop, going through Royal Caribbean's website has been the tried and true method for figuring out basically how much does a cruise cost right now. Now, in the past, it used to be a little bit easier to get the cost of a cruise, but these days, in order to do a mock booking to figure out the price of a cruise today, you've got to go through pretty much the entire process. Not only selecting the sailing and stateroom, but you've got to enter all information, even if you're making up names. You got to get all the way to the end to basically hitting the submit button before you can finally see the full price, whether it's refundable or non-refundable. So finding the breakdown of the final cost of the cruise, including the cost of the prepaid gratuities, fees, taxes, etc., is still a bit of an arduous process. And I would label this as frustrating because sometimes you just want to figure out how much that cruise costs off the bat. Now, if you compare that to going on a website like Amazon.com, it's very easy to figure out how much those shoes or that new computer will cost you. So you can look at it, you can add to your cart to see taxes, and that's it. 2 or 3 clicks, and you're done. Unfortunately, figuring out the total cost of cruises without actually booking something or going all the way through the booking process is impossible to do. Even travel agents essentially have to do the same thing. So definitely a frustrating point out there when you're just trying to compare prices and figure out the best possible cruise, especially when you're on a budget, or repricing, which is, of course, one of my favorite things to do. Another frustrating thing that I have not run into, I don't think personally that I can recall anyway, but it definitely occurs now and then, is somebody who books a cruise, then fast forward weeks, months, or even years later, and that cruise gets canceled because it has been chartered. So the charter business is a big business for Royal Caribbean. This occurs when basically a company or a group approaches Royal Caribbean and says, hey, we want to rent out the ship. Sometimes they do partial ship rent outs and charter the ship that way, but in a lot of cases, they'll actually charter the whole ship. The problem is people have already been booking sailings on that particular cruise, and as a result, when a group charters the ship fully, people that were booked on there get bumped out and are canceled. It's not terribly common, but it does occur with enough prevalence that I certainly see it pop up on the Royal Caribbean blog message boards with enough frequency that it definitely occurs. This is the cost of doing business, so to speak. And at the end of the day, if somebody's approaching you and says, I want to buy out your entire inventory on this particular sailing, it makes a lot of business sense, but it is frustrating for certainly people who have already been booked on that cruise. So I understand the frustration, and it's something that I'm not sure will ever change, quite frankly, but it definitely is a frustration point that's out there. Another frustration for me, and this is one that I will definitely complain to my wife on at least once a cruise, if not once a day, and that's the elevators. For some reason, the logic or lack thereof of the onboard elevators is truly confusing. Basically, you'll be sitting in the elevator bank, hit the button, and you'll be watching the numbers, right, to see where the elevators are, and you will see a perfectly empty elevator zoom right past you because there's another elevator like 8 decks down that is coming to you. Essentially, what I think was happening is the system, the elevator's logic says, okay, we've assigned elevator 1 to the person who just hit the button, me. The problem is elevator 2, as I just mentioned, is completely empty and is going somewhere else, but it bypasses your floor. It bypasses it because, again, another elevators have been assigned to come to your floor, but it seems like it would make more sense for the first elevator to come to you, not the first assigned elevator to come to you. I digress. I'm not sure if that's entirely possible. I'll be perfectly honest with you guys. As much as I know about cruises, I don't know anything about elevator logic or how they're designed, but gosh, it really frustrates me when that occurs. Something else that really bugs me, and we're going to go back to the old mock booking or even just making a cruise booking on a Royal Caribbean's website, and that is having to re-enter details over and over again for booking a cruise. Even when you're logged into Royal Caribbean's website, it really doesn't remember your Crown and Anchor number, age, state of residence, your credit card information, etc. In 2021, I don't think it's that much to ask to have your personal information stored just like you do on every other website that's out there. Certainly, the way around it and the way I deal with it is I call my travel agent to figure it out. But even if you're doing the mock booking just to figure out prices, you still got to enter all those things in order to compare apples to apples, and that is definitely a frustration. So there are my biggest frustrations that I came up with, but I also want to share some of the frustrations that our Royal Caribbean blog readers shared on our message board. Some of these I definitely agree with. Josh Carruthers shared that his biggest frustration is pricing for single occupancy cabins. Still in this day and age, he's paying extra for going cruising. By himself, that is. Melmar02 hates line cutters, especially in the Windjammer at a bar, waiting for doors to open at a show. That's just bad etiquette, whether on a cruise ship or on land. Another reader, Traveler, said the app is a bit of a frustration because it's not clear when it's possible to check in, if at all. Information may be missing in the app sometimes, and of course, public information being in there and being able to check what you've charged or not charged. And lastly, MF on the message board said the most frustrating thing for her is trying to book handicap cabins. They never seem to have enough of them, and if you do want them, you got to book them years in advance in order to grab them before somebody else does. So there you go. There's the biggest frustrations that I and some of our RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com friends have shared. I'd love to know in the comments, what are your biggest frustrations with the cruise line that we all love? Let me know which of these pain points truly stand out to you and which of these you agreed with. While you're down there below this video, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on your notifications so that way YouTube lets you know when I have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.